All right. All right. It is 9 o'clock. Welcome to Avtcore. Again, remember the combination of full screen. Full screen, yeah. Because I don't read Chinese, so I can't find it in English. Well, it's in. It's in the browser, so I don't know. Oh, can people see it okay? This will probably. Oh, yeah. All right. So, can people see it okay? It's. Can people read it okay? I mean, I'd rather it be full screen, but it'll do. Anyway, front row is fine. How's the back row? Bernard, you're in the back row. Can you read the slides? No, not Bernard. Yeah. All right. Sorry, I can't see you, so let's see who this. All right. Anyway, so all right. Minutes. Okay. So we have volunteers. We have Bo and Varun as note takers, and Magnus in the Jabber room. If you are remote, which I see some people are, please use the Mutico queue if you can. If I'm not paying attention, everybody yell at me to say, hey, pay attention to the Mutico queue and press the red button. Taking notes is Bo and Varun. Bo. What's that? Yeah, if you download it, you can probably do it in a different viewer. Yeah. All right. Blue sheet should be going around. Yeah. The site translates everything to PDF automatically because what? F11? Try F11. Don't recommend F11. Better. Control L. No. It talks to her. Well, this is better. It's better than it was. There we are. Excellent. Excellent. Good. So, yes, as blue sheets are going around, join the meeting. You know, if you're remote, you do. Yes. What did I do? Oops. Yeah, I have the wrong URL for the Metico. So hopefully, don't try to go to the Metico for Seoul. You won't have a good time. Not so much going on there anymore. All right. Note well. Hopefully, you've seen this before. If not, please talk to your lawyer. Okay, working group status. So yes, we have now. You might think, looking at the two of us up here, you're an AVTX, but no, you're an Avtcore, because we have merged the working groups. So we are continuing under the name Avtcore because that was the easiest thing for the data tracker, apparently. I was hoping we'd go back to AVT, but apparently if we did that, we would the data tracker would decide that this is a group where nothing had happened in 5 years. It would show us all the status, and 5 years ago nothing sits. So it was easier to keep the Avtcore name. So thank you to Magnus Soprani for sharing Avtcore, and we are happily taking over for them, and we'll still be relying on them for helping us understand what happened in Avtcore while they return. All right, agenda today. First, we'll start with our agenda bash and status update, which is what we're doing right now. Then we will have Mo doing trademarking, and then my very last minute addition, which is to say I decided to write this draft at the welcome reception on Sunday and submitted it yesterday afternoon. So I'm sure you've all read it by now. It's very short, and most of the text I copied and pasted from a draft from 2007. So hopefully it's straightforward, but I will be talking about that. And then at the end, if anybody has any other business, it shouldn't be a very full meeting. And then we can, actually, I guess then we should, and then payload is in this room after that, but I think it's not scheduled till 10:30, so people can take a break. It's 3:30 now. All right, since we, for some definition of we, have had one, I guess no, this was ours. So yes, we have had one RFC published, which is credit control messages for their codecs, some clarifications for basically the guts of it is what FIR means if you're using a layered codec. But there's some other details there too. Next, okay, we've got four documents. Oh, we have two more. Oh, but we missed the Avtcore one. But you want to go to the mic?
Yes, my name is Westland. So we get two RFCs published from the Avtcore side. One is the RTP circuit breakers, and the other one is the RTP multi-stream. So, yeah.
So we're even more productive than we thought, actually. So yeah, so then we've got 4 documents in misref. I believe all of these are blocked on bundle, but I'm not sure. Oh, splicing as well.
Yes, the splicing is rely on the RC. Not RC. It's relying on the RC 5285 bits.
Okay. All right. So we got one on 5285 bits and the other 3 on bundle. So I think no, grid is probably also 5285 bits. That doesn't matter. Anyway, they're all in misref, which means that basically we're done unless anything weird comes up in Auth 48, which hopefully it won't. And even then, that's mostly between the authors and the RFC editor. So that also counts as productive for us. And then milestones is this work we still have to do. So let's talk about that. So ARIA, Ben, you have some comments on the ARIA stuff to us? Do you want to say anything about that? If you go on the front, it's probably better. It's a bad spot for an AD to sit, I guess.
It's a bad luck spot too. I dropped a spoon of yogurt in my lap just as we were starting. So I forget the name of it, but the one that is with me, with the IETF, RESG, is, right, SRTP. I think that is ready to go. Can't remember if we need to go back to IETF last call. I had some questions for the shepherd or chairs or whoever is now shepherding, which you need to decide that, and that I'd like to get cleared up first, but that should be easy enough. In particular, there were some comments in the shepherd's review about some outstanding reviews that I wanted to see if they happened or if they were still needed. The other one, I'm waiting for the working group.
Okay. All right. So I guess, yeah, the one thing we do have to decide is what should happen. I mean, I am, of course, happy for Magnus and Ronnie to keep shepherding drafts we're already doing, but if they don't want to do the work, I also understand that. So any comments from you guys? What did you do with shepherding this one? Is it Ronnie? Okay.
Oh, I'm the shepherd for this one, at least, okay. According to. I don't mind. If you want me, I can just finish that.
It's probably easier not to try to have knowledge transfer.
Okay, I'll try to finish with this one.
And so any the comment about the reviews that Ben.
I'll have to go back because as far as I remember, then we did all of it. It's just for the SRTP. It was the last change. What it was made was just taking out the SDS registration from the document because that was the comment that were made to the IETF last call about the concerns about registering, doing a standard track document from. And of course, it's now informational, the ARIA SRTP.
ARIA SRTP itself is informational, right? But so the issue was that SDS was standard track required.
Yes, I think this is the major problem. I mean, for at least when I was looking at it, it's not clear why the SDS is requires standard track RFC, while the SRTP and the what's the other one? The MIKE doesn't require. So basically, SRTP and SDS should have the same registration requirement, but that's not up to us to do. That's a problem of the documents that created those registries.
I'm not going to defend the SDS policy. We have lots of policies that are inconsistent and don't make sense. I would have to look back at that one to make any a judgment. If people think that's a problem, one can always start an effort to change policies. All it takes is a RFC updating some other RFC.
I have to say I'm not terribly enthusiastic about doing new work on security descriptions.
I tend to agree with that too. Now, actually, we're talking about security descriptions. I keep getting the two SDSs confused.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, that one.
Yeah.
There's reasons for that policy.
Oh, is that try to discourage people from using it?
Yeah, kind of.
Okay. So, I mean, in that case, so I guess the question I would always have is, given that we want to discourage people from using the security descriptions, do we actually want to publish the ARIA security descriptions at all?
I mean, it's not. I mean, this document doesn't do anything about the. It just registered this security profile in the registry. That's all it does. I mean, because the ARIA, by the way, the ARIA itself is I think it's informational or something that's there, but it just. I had a problem also with this comment saying we don't want to have a standard track document registering something that is not that is a country specific codec or something. But I mean, the registry should be more easier to handle on this case. I don't understand why it was in the first place. And the answers I got were not really, the answers I got when I tried to figure out why it is like that, they were saying, oh, we don't remember, we just did it this way. There's no really thought behind it.
I think, Colin Chase, I think the registry is the way it is, because when you're updating something as fundamental of the security of this stuff, we want it to be reviewed by the working group. That was it, right?
But ETLS SRTP is specification required.
Right. So maybe that's wrong. Do we care, right? I mean, they just were formed at different times with different, like by the time we were on DTLS SRTP, the general motivation at IETF, the wind had shifted to we should let anybody register anything they want, otherwise they just sit on our code points. So they should be free for everyone unless there's not enough of them or something. Like we're discussing something that doesn't really matter. I mean, is any of these registration policies causing a problem now, other than they're inconsistent? I guess is the question.
Well, I guess the question is, can we get IETF consensus on registering this code point that the ARIA people want, which is specification, right, which is standard track action.
So I think that what we do is only the registration of the code point, not the ARIA underlying algorithm, right?
But,
yeah, I mean, why couldn't we? It should be like 10 seconds. Yeah, here,
unless people object.
Yeah, does anyone object to doing that?
I mean, not the group, but the IETF consensus.
Ecker, the security AD object. No, but he objects to ARIA being a standard tracks algorithm, right?
He was rejecting to be registering something which is not a document.
Okay, originally these two were one.
Right.
And the objection was that seemed to give ARIA the cachet of a standard strike draft. Mm-hmm. So now we've split them, right? So the SRTP one and the one that's describing I think the one that's describing the cipher suite is informational. And that's what we're talking about today, the one that is before the ASG, right? But then the working group has to figure out what they want to do with the other one.
Right. Well, that's basically what I'm trying to do here. Maybe I was unclear. Personally, I have no problem with, the security descriptions registration being a standard track document, but I'm just worried that trying to convince Ecker that we want to do an IETF consensus on a cipher he doesn't like, using a keying mechanism he doesn't like, might be challenging.
Sometimes you just need to be challenging with ADs. I don't mind helping with that. look, I think that, my point of view is if the working group decided to take on this work and put a milestone for it, at that point in time, we more or less agreed to give it a code point. That's ridiculous to go back on all those decisions at this point in time. I mean, we've got exactly the right solution. I strongly support what we're doing, and I am willing to argue with the ISG it's the right thing.
Okay, so have in the minutes that Cullen volunteers to argue with the IETF.
Magnus Westland. Yeah, I mean, in the discussion we had before, I think it's the last meeting, I think Ecker's position was that if this had a different policy, it wouldn't be considered vetted by IETF and therefore not really approved. So that's what the reason for changing the policy. But I think the right thing just now to do with area is just to push it through.
Okay. Anything else on ARIA? I guess next milestone is multi-path RTP, which is Varun. Can you say anything about static lattice?
Varun Singh. So I think the last time we met, we discussed it maybe a year ago, and the output of that was that we're ready. The document's ready. It needs some work on the security section, but apart from that, it needs wider review. And I think some people volunteered, but I did not get any feedback. So I guess we need to run through the thing again.
Does anybody want to volunteer this time and actually mean it? You're pointing at somebody. Who are you pointing at?
Emil.
Oh, ML is ML volunteered last time, or ML?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, ML looks very shocked at this.
In some fantasy
I
world,
think he
maybe.
means like a year ago you volunteered to review this document. So,
But one was not enough. I think we need more. So
okay. Does anybody else like to volunteer to review this document? Ideally, with a deadline.
I'm not volunteering, but I'd like to sort of, you should try and get Ted Hardy to review it.
He has it. Does he work for you? Too bad. Do you want to volunteer any of the people who work for you, Colin? Because that usually works well. All right.
So that being said, I guess the main point here is that it needs review. I think it just expired today, so I guess the question is, should I just revive it or should just?
I mean, I'd say if you want to do a keep alive and reference update, just to show that it's still there.
All right.
I mean, the draft expiring doesn't matter nearly as much as it used to, because they actually still stay in the accessible, but it never hurt.
Ron, so what do you want to do? You want to do a working group last call, first reviews?
So it sounds like, I mean, if you know that there's still open issues in security,
But that's
I'd say
very
it's probably not ready for working group last call, but I think certainly doing a set of reviews for free last call would be a...
Yeah, I think it would be nice because it's been implemented by various people, and I've gotten feedback from implementers, so it's kind of ready from that perspective.
Okay.
Last time we discussed that we should put something for security there, and there's some discussion of like what way we want to go. With this, I believe some people in the IETF are working on NPRTP with SRTP GTLS thing. So we don't have to wait for that. We just have to say that there might be multiple ways of doing this.
Yeah, I mean, probably you can cite the, there you could cite the, the R, I forget the RFC number, but the, why there's not a single crypto solution for
Right.
RTP.
But the two drafts two RFCs.
Yes. All right.
Not mandatory, or security not mandatory.
Okay, so, yeah, so I guess, Emil, are you actually volunteered? Okay, so Emil says he'll review it, and I guess Georg is asking something like that. I was going to say, Sabrina, do you want to reach out to Ted Hardy as calling recommends, or do you want to share it?
I know of him, so I could, but I don't know if that's going to be sufficient. But I can reach out and see if I get a ping back. If I don't, then I'll.
Okay, that sounds good. All right, multiplexing guidelines, I think. Are those all multiplexing? Oh, okay, that's. Oh, 5085, right. Sorry. getting ahead of myself here. 5285 bis is in AD review. So is there anything interesting there, or is it just, or Magnus, you walk like it? Because Ben has like a mile and a half to walk to the end.
So, Magnus Westland, yes. So there's two comments which actually needs thought, I think. Yeah, so, but yeah, they are not closed yet, but it's.
Okay, do you remember, are there things that might actually need working group consensus? And if you remember at all what they are?
I just looked at them. The one is about security requirements on related to STP offer answer. And Ronny, you.
The first comment was about, there was a text there about that you can do it if you, because it's negotiated to support for the mode that you support both 1 byte and 2 byte. But there was a text there saying that you can do it also if even if you're no negotiation, if you have some other ways to know that the other side supports that. And that was the comment from Ben about it. The reason that it's there, it's because it mostly was because in the cases where you're doing a declarative SDP, you don't get a response and you don't know if the other side supports that. And in order to do this mix of 1 byte and 2 byte, then you have to know that it is supported by some other means. That's the major reason for that. It was not saying that negotiation is not the...
Okay.
Do you want to talk about this now, or you want us to take it offline? It's pretty easy stuff.
Is it I mean, probably on the mailing list. I mean, if you have something quick to say, otherwise.
I was quickly going to say that one could say when using alternate answer, one must, if one is using other mechanisms.
All right.
And what about the second issue? Were there? Yeah.
And then the other question I have is, would you be with Shepard for that, and do you want to keep doing it?
I can continue considering that we're actually already in AD evaluation.
Yeah, I
so
figure once you're in AD review, mostly the Shepard doesn't have a lot to do other than pick the options.
Yeah. Yes. So I expect Ronny to do an update here to resolve this.
Okay.
So.
All right. Now we're actually at. Now multiplexing guidelines.
Okay, recap of history here. So multiplexing guidelines. In almost 1.5 years ago, in Yokohama, we discussed this document and considered, okay, we need to scope it down, focus it, etc. And that was a significant editor task, which I kind of took on, but never have gotten to due to other things. So, and the question is there anyone who's actually willing to do any editing on it now? So I might suggest that we actually drop this milestone rather than keep on doing it. It would be good to have the document, but I don't know. I don't really have the time for.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the question is this document. Is this document needed? I mean, I know that I feel like it was sort of in some sense, a position paper when we were figuring out bundle. But now that bundle is, as we have more or less consensus on what that looks like, is it still needed?
So, I mean, that's supposed to kind of refocus and saying, okay, trying to be clear on giving actual guidance from the position we have after bundle and all other things come into place, let's say. So it's, it would be good. I still think you can figure out most of it from other sources, but it's just that you have to look around a bit to figure out how its land lies, let's say, and what to think about. So, but yeah, I think there's lack of energy to actually complete this.
So, Ronnie Evan. So, but Magnus, aren't there any documents that reference this document as informational? I think it was the other.
Yes, there are a few reference on it. So, but it's
What?
it shows up, I think, in the multiple media types, for example, and it shows up in the how to write payload formats. I think that's the two which I know of.
Yeah, I would be sad to say we're not going to publish a document that turns out to be in the WebRTC dependency chain. That would probably not be a good outcome.
Well, it's an information reference anyway, and I mean, I can go back and look at how it's referenced, because I looked at this for the how-to and etc., and I basically removed it from there. So because it was really not that needed in that document.
Yeah. I mean, if some of these are in misdraft, that means they've already been approved for publication module of the.
I mean, these documents should be an information anyway, be an information reference. It's not blocking any documents.
Okay, so do you want to just publish as a reference to the final version of the ID you wrote?
No, I can send an email to the list and,
Okay,
and
email
make
the list, figure it
make
out.
clear what's the
Yeah, I
reference
mean, I
that
certainly-
exists
You
and
know,
what's.
it certainly sounds like there's not a lot of energy to finish it, unless. Oh, just Colin, I see you're on the chat now. Do you have anything to comment on this? Are you able to do that? You've either joined the media call or take a big and grab it if you can. Well, he's in the room, but I don't see any response to him. Oh, wait, here he comes. Excellent.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi. I think, like Magnus, I am out of cycles to work on this. I agree it would be good to do it, but I can't see myself having time to do so in the near future.
All right. So it sounds like, in the absence of any editors having time to work on it, unless you have any other volunteers to do it.
Ronnie, I'm willing to take a look and see if I can, how it is, and decide whether, but I can be an editor, but I need help from Magnus and Colin, with the text, and part of the text for that. I don't,
Magna, would you be willing to, if Ronnie takes the primary editing pen, are you willing to help?
so I'll talk with Magnus about it and see how
Okay, yeah,
to.
so it sounds like that might be it.
Because I think it's important to finish this document.
Okay. Sounds good. And let's see. LRR is mine. I think it's been on these slides saying ready for working group last call for a year now. And I'm thinking at this point we just go ahead and do it. I mean, we were trying to make sure that we had all the interdependencies with trademarking. We were going to say that, so I think I think that LRR is ready, and any trademarking relationships to it can be figured out in trademarking. So I would suggest that, since I'm the author on that, you want to go ahead and do a working with best call sometime shortly after the meeting. Okay, so we'll do working with best call on that. And trademarking is on the agenda, so only 15 minutes late. What? No, he's there. Okay, so I think we're ready to start trademarking. Unless somebody else has anything more on the agenda. Right? But, no?
We're 15 minutes behind.
Yeah, but yeah, we had an hour and a half, and our schedule. Yeah.
Some people probably figured on things happening after the agenda time. I know I did. Okay, so this is the video frame marking RTP extension, version 4. Next slide, please. Just a quick review of why we're doing this work. The goal is to have an RTP middle box. We call here RTP switch. It could be SFU or one of the other topologies, but the key point is that it's a middle box that wants to avoid deep payload inspection. And number one, to avoid decryption. And some architectures may not even be able to perform the decryption, may not have the end-to-end keys required to look at the media payload. So PERC would be a prime example of that. And even if it did have the keys for scale, it would be advantageous to avoid having to do the decryption if it could. So that's another motivation. And then finally, you can design your middle boxes hopefully to be payload agnostic, so that even future payload formats could be supported transparently And that's another goal of this work, so that all media payloads that conform to certain basic requirements can use the same header extension and allow the middle box to do forwarding decisions without even knowing what the payload is. Next slide. And some other motivations around improving the operation of both the middle box and the endpoints. We can get better recovery when you have packet loss scenarios. Identifying where the start and end of frames are is tricky with current payload formats, and this unifies it and makes it more robust. You can do clean video switching at iframes, so you can identify when each recipient has all of the packets necessary for intro refresh. And under congestion, switchers can make decisions about the relative importance of packets. So if it has to drop packets towards a particular endpoint's downlink, it can make an intelligent decision about that drop. And it can drop entire layers if it wants to bring down the quality of a particular stream to a particular receiver. And endpoints can also use this header extension for some of the same benefits. The better information about start and end frame markers allow better recovery, so you don't have to decode and display dirty artifacts. Next slide. Okay, so this is the extension as it stands right now. If you remember in the last version, we actually forked it into two different versions of it, a short form and a long form. So this is the full long form. It has the layer IDs, the TID layer ID and TL0 pick index fields. And that's when you have length equals 2. And the 5285 length is 1 plus. So 2 here actually means 3 bytes following it. That's the long form. And in the short form, if you put length 0, then you only have 1 byte afterwards, which is basically the flags, the frame flags, the SCI DB, and the rest of the fields are omitted. Next slide, please. So the changes that we made, there were some comments about what if the middle box doesn't have all the information required for all the layer IDs. And so the earlier in version 3, we said that the short form was only for non-scalable streams. So if you had no scalability in the stream, you use the short form. If you have scalability in the stream, you have to use the long form. And so there was...
I think there's a typo there, right? You got the reversed.
No, I think it's right. So
Okay.
The
short header was for the non-scalable, right?
The short header was for the non-scalable, and it was only for the non-scalable in version 3. There were comments about what if the middle box knows it's forwarding scalable streams, but it doesn't actually have all the scalability info.
Okay.
So it's allowing the middle box to use the short header even for the scalable streams. So I know my stream is scalable, but I really don't know what the layer IDs of it are, so I can still use the short form. So the text is there. We recommend using the short header for non-scalable streams, but you may also use it for scalable streams if you don't have information about the scalability. And then the flip side of that is also allowed. So you can use the long version, the full extension, even if you're forwarding non-scalable streams. And so this may be a simplification in some boxes to have uniformity of the headers as they go out. And when you do that, you must set all of the scalability layer IDs to 0. Right? Everything was fine with that, right? Okay. So next change is LRR. There was a request to have LRR and frame markings harmonized, and so Jonathan and I had a talk, and we looked at the different fields, and we think we have what we need. It was just a message a few minutes before the meeting started about VP9 payload format, the VP9 scalability fields, and I believe that that's correct. It needs to be updated. This version of the draft still reflects the old pre-working group version of the VP9 draft. So VP9 changed its scalability information along the way, and I think we need to update to include that. But I think it still has the info that we need for LRR.
Yeah, so I had a question, Mo. I know for temporal scalability, we have the TL0 pick index, so if you lose a base layer frame, you can figure out what depended on it. Jonathan, do we have everything for loss of, say, a spatial packet to figure out what the dependencies are?
Yeah, much as an individual. So the answer is I'm not sure because I mean obviously if you have a codec where your layers are numbered sequentially, you do, but there's some that aren't. Particularly 264 SVC, I think is the DQ ID, so they're actually almost always not going to be sequential. In which case, no, you don't. Right. So in that case, yeah, you'd need to know somehow what the structure of the, I mean, obviously, if you're in a situation where you know how the LIDs are interpreted, then you can, presumably. But the part of this is that you can be, you work for a router which is agnostic to what LIDs, which doesn't know anything about the codec, and thus doesn't know how LIDs are encoded. So, yeah, so basically, like for instance, I think for an H.264 SVC stream, your LEDs will actually be numbered something like, I don't know how many bits it is, but it'll be something like 0, 8, 16, 24, because the Q layer is the bottom 3 bits and the others, and the D layer is the upper bits. So a box that is ignorant of 264 SVC, sees layer 0, let's sees layer 8, and they panic and think, oh my god, I'm missing layers or something. So I mean, I don't think this is something information we want to put in the headers themselves because it's big. Putting it in the signaling would be hard. I'm not sure what's the
You're talking about the scalability structures?
Yeah, essentially.
The full scalability structure
I
packets?
don't know. I mean, full scalability structure would be sufficient but big, and I don't know if it's necessary.
Definitely not for frame marking.
Yeah, no, I don't think so. So unless you want to somehow send it out of band or something crazy. So, yeah.
So the current draft does not say that the IDs should be interpreted sequentially. It does say that higher IDs indicate higher fidelity, but it doesn't make the assumption that they should be contiguous. And of course, the mappings show that there's bit fields within those.
Right.
So you should know.
Yeah, so I guess the question is, can this, codec agnostic middle box tell if something, when something's missing in a frame? And the answer is no, I think it can't.
Tell when something is missing?
Something's missing. Basically, like for TL0 pick index, you can tell with temporal layers if you're missing a dependency. But with spatial, you can't.
Right, but there's also the B bit, which is whether or not you have a base layer sync.
Right, so B layer is base layer sync, which actually is another point I want to get to when we finish discussing this. But I mean, but I guess, so the point is that, if you're in a situation where spatial layers are always the same timestamp, then you can tell just probably by whether you actually RTP sequence number is missing. In sufficiently weird layering structures, you might not be able to tell, but maybe we don't care.
I think we had this discussion before that if your scalability structure is very complex or not even fixed, I think there's no hope of any extension that would simplify things. So it's only for if you have a simple and fixed scalability structure, then this could be useful, and your forwarding decisions could be automatic.
Right.
Otherwise, there's really no hope.
Okay. So I guess related to that, we want to put something in the draft saying, this is for scalability structures that follow these. Don't use it for complicated scalability structures because you'll have a bad time. So sort of basically have some sort of applicability statement saying these are the sort of scalability structures you should use this for. Don't use it for anything else because you'll just confuse people.
Right. Okay. That could be a good clarification.
Yeah. The other comment I had on LRR, I think this is good. I would strengthen. So one thing I'd add is, in addition to saying they are the same, I would say that when you're defining this for a new codec, if you're defining this for a new codec which supports both LRR and frame marking, it must be the same. Basically, have a stronger statement saying for new standards, we must encode them the same way.
Okay, so just must correspond to the same
Yeah,
values.
must. They do
Okay.
correspond to the ones we defined, and must for anything future defining if it's using both.
Okay, yeah, that's a
And then the other thing is
stronger statement.
just guidelines for. And I think this is just a matter of doing the right thing with the B bit, but guidelines for recognizing when you have a layer refresh point. It's probably just, do you have the right B bit? But so basically, how do you know when your LRR has been satisfied? You see what I mean? You send an LRR for LID 45.
Right.
You get a packet in, has it been satisfied? So maybe that's just you got a thing with LID 45 and the B bit set, and that might be sufficient. But I think we should at least have a statement to that effect.
Okay.
And then my third comment about the VP9 stuff. You mentioned.
No tickers getting these things that
Yeah.
to put in.
Yeah, I was 11. So, Bo and Bruin, did you get that, or do you need me to clarify what I said? Let's say again.
Well,
we'll think afterwards,
let's just
yeah.
quickly summarize. So you wanted to say, first of all, you got the must.
Yeah.
Must correspond.
Yeah.
LRR must use the same values
Yeah.
as frame markings.
Yeah.
And then number two,
Number two was in the frame marking drafts, it's just saying, I need to make sure this is correct. Basically saying that when you send an LRR, the way you tell that the LRR has been satisfied, I think, is that you receive a packet, or maybe a starter frame packet. This is the details we need to work out with the B bit set and that TID and LID in the packet.
so identifying when layer refresh has
Been
happened
satisfied. Yes.
through frame marking.
Yes, right. And then the third thing I was going to comment about, you mentioned about the VP9. I confess that I'm moving rather slowly on the VP9 payload format, so it might make sense to pull the VP9 stuff out of this draft and move it into the VP9 draft, saying this is how you use, this is the encoding for frame marking for VP9.
Okay, that would remove the misrefs that we're going to get
Exactly.
for a long time.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
And then that also gives us a template for how a new payload format should describe how you use it with frame marking.
Okay. Yep.
Ron, Evan, just a question about the point you made about with the LRR. Why is it important that when you send an LRR, you have to review it in the frame marking? I mean, it's mostly you have to know it in the encoding, but I don't understand why you need it to identify it in the frame marking.
Jonathan, so I mean the goal here is that I want it to be possible for this codec agnostic middle box to actually both send and receive LRRs, so that he can do the layer refresh. He can handle the layer refresh without knowing the codec.
Yeah, I guess you could avoid forwarding, partial layer information that that the receiver is not going to be able to decode. So you could avoid sending him bad data, useless data. And I guess you could also start sending him good data when the switching points arrive.
So it will not be that simple, because the middle box will also need to suppress the request that may come from the remote side that will ask for that. I mean, it's not like that.
Yeah, I definitely don't plan to document all of that in frame marking. I will just document when you receive a frame marking, what does it mean, and when do you know that means the layer refresh happened? So we can put that part in this spec. Complex things I think should go into LRR middle box considerations. Okay, so anything else on LRR? Or are we good with it? Okay. Okay, one other thing that Bernard, I think, brought up was how does this work with repair streams? And we updated the document to show that this only applies to the source RTP streams, not to the repair streams, and specifically only to video payloads. So if you're trying to use this for audio or for FEC or retransmission payloads, that's not going to work. It's not specified here. You need another draft for that. Now, we'll note, though, that really probably what you want is to recover the original packets markings from RTX or FEC. And the RTX or FEC format will tell you usually how to do that, how to recover header extensions that were on the original packet. So it wouldn't be this draft showing how those packets get marked. It would be the repair format that would actually show how to preserve the header extension of the original packet.
Magnus Westland, I guess that actually comes into question how you structure the repair streams. I'm thinking about the PERC use cases here. When it's encrypted, etc., you need to structure the things right so it can have visibility into the repair streams.
Yeah, that's so in the we ran into the same issue with FlexFEC, and you'll see in the next hour we have a suggestion for the order between FEC and SRTP for situations like PERC.
Ronnie Evans. So going back to my previous question about the LRR stuff, then if the middle box does an LRR, then there's a repair stream that she doesn't know about it, then why should it send an LRR in the first place? Because, I mean, it's like a bit contradictory in that case.
So again, to Magnus's point, that if you're an architecture, like PERC, one of the goals is for the middle box to actually participate in the repair and not be blind to the repair. So in that case, the middle box can receive repair and generate repair if it wanted to. In that case, it would be able to decide whether or not to forward LRRs or whether it has all the information for the layer anyway and discard the LRRs. Okay, so no objections to making sure that this only specifies source RTP streams and only video payloads.
I mean, if anybody ever comes up with layered audio codecs, they can define how it works with this.
All right, next slide. So there was also a previous draft from Bernard about general considerations when you're building an SFU. It has a lot of things in it, not directly related to frame markings, but some things do directly relate to frame marking. And in the previous versions, we had a reference to it, and I don't think the work is going to progress. So I think the decision was to import the parts that are relevant to frame marking. So we did that. And the most notable part is actually what we were just discussing a little while ago, the scalability infrastructures. When you have fixed scalability formats, those scalability structures, 264 now in PAXI headers, or actually payload units, and 265 now in PASI info, those things are pulled over from the other spec. So we can let it die if we want to now without any kind of reference issue. And I think we also need to add the VP9 scalability structure. Oh, well, actually, we will remove anything about VP9 and we'll let the VP9 spec add the VP9 scalability structure info. All right, next slide. First point, open issues. The first point I think we already resolved. This is not going to support redundancy streams. The next point is something that Neil had brought up when looking at this in the context of PERC. Probably a longer discussion that we need to have in the PERC session, since he's going to be presenting something about it there. But the quick high order bit here is that when a participant or a middle box is using RTP to probe the link, and it may only use padding, it's not actually sending any media payload at all. It's just using RTP padding to probe the link with different byte lengths. The problem is that in PERC, the padding is encrypted. The padding length indicator even is encrypted. So a middle box wouldn't know whether or not this is real media or padding only media, and so it may not know whether or not to forward it. One of the proposals in Emil's spec is to extend frame markings to be able to indicate that this is padding only. One of the things that we considered is maybe this is a good use of the discardable bit. If the padding only packets mark as discardable, the middle boxes could drop them if they wanted to. And then also another option is don't use the real payload type of media stream. It's a little odd to say this is 264 VP9 media, and you really it's just a padding probe. So you could use the FEC or retransmit payload type or even RTCP, something that's not indicating an actual real media payload type to do that probing. That would be another option. So if either one of those are acceptable, I think we could avoid the impact of frame marking.
Emilio, so thanks for taking that into consideration. First of all, it's Boris' spec, it's not my spec, but credit given much praise due. And so I don't think discardable would be. What's that?
Don't hold your hand over your mouth when you're talking.
But it sounds more mysterious this way.
Yes, and incomprehensible.
So I don't believe discardable would work because you have discardable packets that are meant end-to-end, and these basically must be job data as the SFU. So unless I'm missing some clear way you could distinguish between the two.
Well, I'm assuming that this probing phase is like pre-call probing. This is not.
No, it's mid-call probing.
So what are you actually trying to do here? Is this MTU discovery?
No, this is just bandwidth probing.
Discovery.
Bandwidth probing.
Or you could do MTU also. There's no actual payload. It's only padding. You're not just padding out a packet.
So I'm just concerned that actually, so if you send a packet claiming it's 8264 and say it's only padding, what you're actually sending is a zero-length 8264 packet, which is not a valid 8264 packet. So I don't see how this is valid at all.
Hence oddity on the last word.
Yeah.
I mean, we don't
So
requires
yes, we could.
Outside the context of
It's not invalid either, and
it's a every 8264 packet is required to have a null unit header.
So it's almost like a no-op. It's almost like RTP no-op.
Yeah, you want to resurrect RTP no-op.
so note taken. This is not. I'm not trying to defend that way of doing bandwidth probing. That's how bandwidth probing is happening today, in Chrome specifically. I'm not sure about Firefox. Maybe it's the same. And the third bullet there, the third dash there, is a very noble goal, but it's not how things work today. So I think it would be, if you compare the workload necessary to get these implementations to change with the workload necessary to add a bit that says you can drop this, I think it's clearly easier to just add that bit. Not to mention that there's nothing wrong with it. It's useful.
So my personal view is that the second one is the best recommendation. That it's odd to send real media payload types with no real media in them. That avoids Jonathan's point too, that you wouldn't confuse a decoder by sending it a zero byte
I
packet.
agree that this is how things should be done. It's not how things are done. So
I'm going to say that I would not say, saying we're going to standardize how Chrome currently does WebRTC, this is like about, 95th on the list of things that they're currently doing wrong.
But you have to make some change, right? I mean, if we add it in frame marking, the implementation has to change to support it. So I think it's an equivalently easy change to do the second bullet, use a FEC payload type for the probing. Okay. That would be to interpret a new header.
So I completely understand these points, and I guess it's just a matter of implementation preferences, and there are probably alternative solutions that we could just look at and PERC.
Well, you have until Wednesday to figure out.
Header,
you have until Wednesday to figure out your response, right?
Yeah, sure, but we reserve ourselves the right to come and beg again for this to be included in frame markings.
So if anybody's interested, there's in the PERC session there'll be a description of more detailed description of this and another aspect, RTX formats for PERC and these padding only formats. So we can follow up discussion there. That's it, I think. So I guess we're not ready for Worker Plus call because we're going to remove the VP9 stuff out of the draft.
Yeah, and, well, I'll work with you as the author of VP9 to figure out what to put into the VP9 draft.
Yeah, okay. Other than that, I think we're done.
All right, so hopefully you'll get a new route with those changes relatively soon, and hopefully we can go to Working Plus call after that. All right, sounds good. All right, anything else on trademarking? If not, I can do my surprise last minute edition of draft. So, yeah, this came up when, I'm trying to bully various implementations into finally moving away from security descriptions. And they said, but we're doing, AES 256, what should we do? And I said, I looked at the registry and said, hey, there's no registration for AES 256 counter in DTLS SRTP. That's bad. So, next slide. So I looked over I did some, draft archaeology and discovered that, the thing that became, did I get those numbers right? I think I got those numbers wrong, whatever. The DTLS SRTP spec, up through like draft 03 of the working group draft had definitions for these, but the AES 56 draft itself wasn't ready yet, so it got taken out, but then those registrations never got put into the AES 56 draft, and I'm pretty sure this was just an oversight. If you're going to talk about Gawa counter mode, that's on the next slide.
I was going to say, I think that was a deliberate decision at the time. And the argument for it that I recall, which may be very hazy, it's a long time ago, was that we were trying to reduce complexity of the sheer number of security options we need to negotiate. And no one had any argument for any use case where this was better than the other ones. So it was like, why we were trying just to reduce the implementation complexity of having, like, note by adding this registration, you're not removing the need to do GCM. You're just adding another thing you have to do as well, right? So that's why we removed it back then. And I think that's still a very solid argument today. I'm going to make it at the end of this.
Okay.
But
all right.
I don't think it was to cause a reference to go away. It wasn't just like, oh, we can make this misref go away.
Yeah, I mean, certainly I think there was consensus not to do 192 because nobody cares about 192. But, I mean, so I read over I read if this was the decision, it wasn't documented anywhere because I read over the mailing list archive from the relevant time period. And
as none of our decisions made in working group meetings are documented, you are correct, yes.
Yeah, I mean, I could see I don't know if that was, yeah, I mean, I could see if I can find the minutes for the relevant meetings, but,
let's hit the root cause here. I mean, I'm very sympathetic to, like, what do we need to convince people to do new stuff?
Mm-hmm.
So what was the actual problem people had?
In terms of what?
You said you went and wrote this because some people didn't want to move to something because
right, yeah. So
they
basically,
didn't,
right now, I mean, they have customers who probably for stupid reasons thinks we want to use AES 256 rather than AES 128 for our SRTP because it's more secure.
Oh, okay. I'm fully on board with that. I know it's bigger, it's better. I have a bunch of those customers myself.
Yeah, and so what but these their crypto kernels don't have Galois counter mode in them, and it's something FIPS certified, so it's not going to happen anytime soon. So basically, if I go and tell them, yeah, you should move to DTLS, it's great. They say great. And I say, but it means either you have to cut back to 128-bit keying or move to Galois counter mode. They say, no, I think I'll stay with security descriptions.
So it'd be really interesting to understand which crypto kernels they're using that don't have that do have it for 256 counter mode, because that's the one I'm willing to believe there's some out there. I'm not aware of any that don't have that. And this was a year of my life. That's why
the short answer is ours.
Ah, okay. And is your FIPS certified too on it?
Yeah.
So, yeah, okay. I feel your pain, and I'm more okay. That makes me more positive towards this.
Okay. Yes. Yeah, and the other point is, libsrdp actually implemented these code points because, as far as I can tell, nobody noticed that it got taken out of the draft. And so, I submitted a pull request on removing them for the beta that's about to come out because I said, hey, wait a second, this is never defined. But then I thought about it, I said, wait, this is a bad idea. I should maybe just define them. So the next slide. Again, why not use GCM? And the answer is we want to make it easy to move off of security descriptions. And like I said, our crypto kernel doesn't have GCM in it. All right. Next one. Okay, again, and thoughts. So I guess Colin is saying, we want to minimize complexity. And, I understand that. That said, like I said, libsrtp has had this in the code for a while now. So probably, if you're concerned about what Cisco implementations will do, the answer is they're probably already doing this.
I know how they're negotiating. It doesn't matter if they're already in the code or whatever.
Yeah.
Right? I know it's negotiated. A lot of that stuff is, we generally move it out at the policy level higher.
Okay.
So, what we'd offer and what's generated in the SDP is different than what the underlying
all this
library.
DTLS, nothing's in the SDP anyway, because it's all in the.
Yeah.
It's all in the. Just say I'm doing DTLS and figure it out.
My preferred path to this would be to figure out how to get you GCM code. I think that would make the world a better place.
Right.
Because, if you go down this path, you still will not have an implementation that is compliant with DTLS SRTP, which requires GCM as MTI.
No, it doesn't. Not for SRTP. The DTLS. We're in this weird situation where we're not using that for we're using different crypto kernels for the DTLS part than for the actual SRTP part. It's stupid, but it's the way we did it. I don't want to explain why.
I'm familiar with things so stupid I don't want to explain them. I don't know. I don't think this is a casual decision. I think that this actually makes interoperability harder on the long term, and I on the other hand would like to make sure that we can make things easier for people trying to actually build stuff. So
right.
I don't really know what we should do with this, but I do not think this is a trivial decision.
Yes, and I'm certainly sad that we're opposite TLS because at the time I scheduled it, I wouldn't have thought that would be a conflict, but I wrote this draft yesterday.
This has been, and since you said that, I haven't read the draft, but I have a comment.
Okay.
We're talking about a registration in the DTLS SFTP protection profile
right.
registry, right?
Right.
Which is specification required, not.
That's true.
We just had that discussion earlier.
Yes. That's true, but.
That doesn't mean the working group can't have a consensus on it.
Yeah, it feels like something. It feels like a very weird thing to do, given that, it's a, standards track spec but yeah, I could just, but yeah. And all the other thing is, given that
the expert is Ecker, though, by the way.
Well, Ecker would seem to be enthusiastic about it, seem to be at least open to this. So I'm sorry he's not here.
So, Magnus Westland, I want to voice my opinion about this because to some degree I understand Callan's. At the same time, it's not like we have tons of DTLS SRTP protection profiles. There's only one other 256-bit keyed one, and that's the AES GCM one. And in total, there's currently 6 registered.
2 of which are the null cipher.
Yeah.
We never did 192.
Yeah.
No, we skipped 192 entirely for this because everybody knew it was useless.
So I do think it's a reasonable thing to actually register for the SRTP cryptos ciphers that we do have an IETF consensus on to actually have it possible to negotiate. So.
Harald Alvestrom, not having read the draft.
I wrote it yesterday. That's understandable.
So when we make a registry specification required, it's usually because if someone's using crap out there with a consistent number, we want that number in the registry. So whether we recommend it for use or not is a completely different question. But if someone out there is using this number or name or whatever it is, in any way, shape, or form, it's better to have it in the registry than to leave it undocumented.
Mozinati, just to clarify one thing on Colin's point, I think maybe the reasoning would be that, you know, we allow a bunch of crap into STP because we all think it's crufty anyway, and you know, a lot of people want to move away from it, you know, to something else in the future. We typically don't have that philosophy in DTLS, and we don't want to pollute DTLS with things. And so maybe the pushback is that this actually has to go into the DTLS SRTP, you know, profiles, you know, in those structures. And so that does add, you know, craft into the DTLS, something we don't expect to replace, something we don't want to grow absurdly complex like STP. So maybe there is a difference there between allowing a spec to go forward in STP versus allowing it to go forward in DTLS payload structures.
This is Ben again. Did I hear you correctly at the beginning of the discussion that this is to enable people who are currently using security descriptions to move into DTLS SRTP, and if we don't do this, they won't?
It's, or at least it's, I mean, won't is a strong word, but I have to argue with them a lot more. And, you know.
So this helps enable that?
Yes.
So then I would say we have a competition of harms here. And which do we hate the most? Which one would you rather have, the people moving to using DTLS SRTP versus keeping the registry clean?
I mean, I certainly know which one I would prefer. And like I said, I'm still not convinced that, you know, I'd need to check the history on Colin's point about 236, because I
want to highlight, look, I don't know what I think about this anymore, okay? But because all good points made at the mic.
Okay.
But I do worry that, look, let's say we go down this path and these people do exactly what you're proposing here. We now have just created a DTLS SRTP. Your implementation will not interoperate with our implementation, and that sounds like a failure of the IETF. And I'm not saying that means there should only be one code point. I'm meaning the problem is you do not have a DTLS SRTP implementation unless you implement the MTI ciphers, which has just one, GCM. You have to do GCM to have a compliant DTLS SRTP implementation.
No, I think that the compliant is, what, for...
Okay, I may be wrong on the RFCs, maybe I'll take that back, but you have to do that to have an interoperable implementation. That is a fact.
WebRTC, I think, says AES 128 ICF.
Oh, it definitely does.
Yeah.
But I believe that the underlying DTLS SRTP draft, one of the other ones does as well, actually. I'm not positive, I might be wrong. But anyway, it doesn't matter. The point is, the path you're taking us down leads to non-interoperability, which was exactly the reason we didn't go down this path, right?
Yeah, Magnus Westlund. I think, I mean, DTLS SRTP only requires you to implement the AES 128 bridge. No, it's not GCM.
I counter.
No, then if you're thinking that there must be some updated DTLS, just the DTLS spec that may require GCM, but the DTLS SRTP spec only requires you to have 128 the counter mode.
Harald Alderstrom, I have now heard two things that are completely inconsistent in my mind. One is that the registry is specification required. The other thing from Cullen is that putting more stuff in the registry will destroy interoperability. That's what I heard you say.
Harold, I'm not arguing that in the slightest. I agreed with all the comments that are made up here, okay? I'm saying that the argument to do this, the proposal you're doing for adding this sort of thing, right? You know, I find it motivational. It's good. Maybe we should just go do it. But I'm not talking about the IANA registration bullshit process. That doesn't matter. That is irrelevant here, right? The question is like, what path do we try and encourage implementers to go down to get us to what we're trying to accomplish, right? And the original argument why we removed a whole bunch of profiles was we thought that they were actually causing things to be harder for implementers, not easier for implementers. And is that the case here or not? It's hard to tell. And I don't know. I'm not objecting to this draft right now. I don't know what I think. It's just brought up why we got here. I'm certainly not arguing. If you you have a draft, you can go request this in the registry tomorrow, it'll be in there, right? I mean,
I don't know if you can do it with an ID, but I'd have to talk, but
well, I mean, you have a specification in the form of draft. That's a
Okay.
specification as far as I'm concerned. So, and you can get it in the registry with no input from this working group.
Now I understand. Thank you.
All right, so I'm not sure what the best way forward is. I mean, I could do it as a, I could do it as a pure specification required, but I still feel odd about this for something that for a crypto, an SRTP spec, which is itself an IETF standards track. So, I don't know, AD advice?
I think you should do it and register it here. I mean, I don't understand the argument about interoperability, because the interoperability is not as in this, but the interoperability is in the implementations, and both the RTC web and I had to do it also include RTP mapping to specify what must be supported.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I don't think anybody is recommending making this an MTI of anything. So.
And it's, where it's made MTI is in this specific documents, because it is in the clue in the RTC web, and in clue because it was in RTC web, I got a comment from in the IETF view that it needs to have. We need to specify one.
Cullen, if we were to, would you accept being in the rough if we decided to make this a working group item?
No, yeah, for sure. I mean, this is, as I said, I don't even know if I am in the rough. I just
Okay.
like.
Okay, I mean, we'll certainly try to consult with,
I mean, in
Ecker
general, I like applaud. Thank you for bringing it in and considering it the way you do versus just going and filing
Yeah.
it how you could have, right? You
Right.
could have used process to hack this, but I mean, I just like. Obviously, let's think about what's the best thing we can do to help you guys get to an interoperable
Okay, yeah,
position,
sure,
right?
sure, sure.
Overall,
Yeah.
I have no problem with
Okay.
whatever the working group decides.
Magnus Westland. I would make another comment on this. I think this really should go to the list, etc., and maybe you should go talk to some of the people who's not here
Yeah.
that might care
I mean,
about this.
I've talked to some of the people offline. I mean, both Martin and Ecker seemed like they were okay with it, but I mean, so.
Yeah, considering that this we currently had running against TLS, it's
Yeah, exactly. So.
So I'm going to take back my statement a minute ago about having no particular AD advice. I will point out that making this a working group item takes working group resources and time for something that can be done as specification required. So getting the advice of the working group is perfectly fine. Going through the glass call process and all that sort of thing is probably overkill. If people really think this is a problem, then we need to relook at the registration policy.
All right, so maybe I should just talk to Diana and figure out what they actually want for specification for this kind of specification required, because I think an ID would not be sufficient. I would be, because it is an expiring document. Yeah. Right. Can I ask what the side conversation? It sounds interesting. Apparently not. Magnus, can you? We're curious what what were you saying? It sounds interesting.
okay. So sorry. Yeah, I mean it's specification required. You still need the specification, and that
Right.
normally means we prefer specifications from some type of SDO,
Right.
which means that to some degree you need to get it approved somewhere, written up and approved, and have a stable permanent reference. That's the
Yeah, I
kind
mean, I
of
could publish this as informational rather than standards track in this
yeah.
working group, but that's not actually, that's work for the working group.
yeah.
I think having it in GitHub is sufficient for specification required, and we'd be glad to take on that argument.
All right, I'll talk to Diana and figure out what they actually want for specification, and then see what, and probably also talk to the security people and see what they think of this. All right. No idea what to do, but that's okay. Anyway, back being chair, I think that's the end of the meeting, unless anybody has anything else they wanted to raise for ABT, or X, or anything else. Going once? All right, I think we have 15 minutes for payload. Everybody sign the blue sheets. A few over there, Magnus, a few over there. One, two, whatever. Okay.
So we were having a payload in about 15 minutes, something like that.
Right. Yes. Yeah. Right. Okay.